Is anybody really surprised what happened with the Dolphins in 2018? I mean, really, is anybody surprised at all? This team screamed out mediocre to bad from the jump. There was just no real reason to buy into this team and think that they were going to be good. There just wasn't. Cutting Pouncey, cutting Sue, the questions about whether or not Tannehill was going to come back and if he was going to be any good or not. The midseason trade last year, Jay Ajayi, they're just the trading away of Jarvis Landry. You know, I could go on and on and on. If anything, what 2018 looked like from the offseason, from the jump, was a team that was really, really looking to slowly, sneakily begin a bottoming out rebuilding process, which frankly was needed. Now, some of this could be credited to Adam Gase and his ego and his poor decision-making when it came to personnel, and there certainly is blame here. But that's the vibe that I've got, and that's the vibe we'll continue to get, I'm sure, as we go into 2019. And I look at this team, like even when they started off 3-0, like you wanted to give them a little bit of props and you wanted to kind of buy in a little bit, but didn't it always feel like they were just punting the ball down the road, so to speak, and the chickens would come home to roost eventually? Like even when they're 7-6, 3 weeks to go in the season, you've got a shot at the playoffs. Win out, and you might get in. And that would be 2 playoff trips and 3 seasons as head coach for Adam Gase. But instead of winning their last 3 games, they lost their last 3 games. And it's not a surprise to see that Tannenbaum got reassigned within the organization, so he's no longer your decision maker when it comes to personnel. Although you wonder who really was making the decisions when it came to personnel. It sure felt like it was Adam Gase, and Adam Gase was sent packing as he should have been. His offense wasn't very good. His defense absolutely stunk. And you start off 3-0 and you're at 7-6, and then when you really get to nut-cutting time, you lose your last 3 games. No development really out of Tannehill. Like this whole fantasy, this fiction that Adam Gase is some fucking mystical quarterback whisperer. Like he benefited being the quarterback's coach and sometime offensive coordinator for fucking Peyton Manning. And as I've always talked about with Peyton Manning, when you have Peyton Manning as your quarterback, he's the offensive coordinator. So this whole folly or fantasy that Adam Gase was some type of miraculous, spectacular QB whisperer, offensive guru, and play-calling genius, and all this shit just is fantasy. It's hashtag fake news. That's what it is. It's fake news. Because it's not true and it's not grounded in reality. And it's also a perfect example of sometimes you get hot on these young assistants, and then when they actually have more responsibility, more decision-making, and their perspective change in terms of their role, they're just not ready and they're just not equipped for it. And Adam Gase is one of those guys. So, of course, the idiots in New York, the Jets, decided they had seen plenty and they got a hard-on for him and his eyes, and they wanted Adam Gase to be their guy. Well, Miami, good for you, is let another team in that division worry about him. You got your own problems. It sounds like, according to all reports and based off the fact they still haven't hired a head coach as of the time of this recording, that Brian Flores, the defensive coordinator of the New England Patriots, is going to be the team's next head coach, which is cool. There's actually a brother getting a job this year instead of getting fired. But when you go beyond that, you really have to question the intelligence of the organization, whereas the league is going for all these Sean McVay guys. Like one time I saw his dingling when I was standing next to him at the freaking urinal at the stadium. Ha! I want you to be my head coach. The Miami Dolphins instead want to go up the rotted Bill Belichick coaching tree. Really? Like what's the best NFL branch of the Bill Belichick coaching tree? Especially in recent times. Bill O'Brien. You've got the Romeo Crennel failures. You've got the Charlie Weiss failures in college. You've got all these other guys. Eric Mangini, failure. Josh McDaniels, first time around, failure. Matt Patricia in Detroit after 1 year, failure. Like you can sit there and point to, well, Nick Saban and Kirk Ferentz were once on his freaking coaching tree. Nick Saban was also a bust for the Dolphins, ironically, in the NFL as a head coach. Him and Ferentz have done their thing in college, and they also were on his staff over 2 damn decades ago. So what the hell organization wants to go barking up this rotted, wilted, fruitless coaching tree? I don't know. I don't get it. I don't get it. This feels like one of these hires that's destined to be a 2 or 3 year thing as you go through the bottoming out in the beginning of a rebuild, and then you bring in somebody else that you really, really want, is what it feels like to me. And what's crazy about it is you got this Dolphins team with this mediocre to bad team, and they don't even have a lot of salary cap space, $13 million. Like, what the fuck have you been spending your money on? You cut a bunch of guys, and you still were mediocre. And you don't have much in the way of cap space. It's crazy. I still don't understand why they did that whole massive restructure. Tannehill, his contract, you looked at it, it just didn't make any sense, especially now because he's probably going to be a cap casualty. The good thing for the Dolphins is they can save themselves a lot of money with some of the guys they can get rid of for salary cap purposes. Ryan Tannehill, Reshad Jones, Robert Quinn, Kenny Stills, Devontae Parker, Andre Branch, Josh Sitton, Danny Amendola, Kiko Alonso. The vast majority, if not all of those guys, can be shown the door, and you're going to be no worse for wear because you're going to stink anyway, so what the hell is the difference? Might as well save some money in the process and perhaps roll some of that money over into 2020 when you might be really starting to rebuild around a young quarterback. Maybe you bring back Cameron Wake for another year as a free agent. I'm cool with that. He still plays as an NFL starter level. He's earned that money, and you need to have somebody to give you some credibility. Maybe you bring back William Hayes. Maybe you decide to bring back Juwan James. But if you do, okay, just don't overpay for him, which you know they would have to. If you don't. Because he's not exactly special any damn ways. Like, you look at this team, and the lack of identity, the lack of difference makers, the lack of real star power is just striking. So you're starting to hear the reports about this team really thinking about, frankly, tanking in 2019 because they want to get into the 2020 quarterback market. It's not that surprising because it's kind of the reality of who they should be at this point. Because they were mirror again this year. They've got, what, the 13th pick? What do you exactly get done with that? Maybe get a quarterback they massively reached on in round 1? I don't know. Last year's draft class, how did they do? I thought Minka Fitzpatrick was okay. Gesicki, you got to give him more time. Jerome Baker was okay. And you look at Kalen Ballage, maybe he'll get more opportunities under a new system, under a new staff, who knows. But what's concerning for this Dolphins team, and part of the reason when I talk about the lack of identity and the lack of star power, you look at their recent history with their first-round picks from 2012 to 2017, it's not all that good. Ryan Tannehill ended up being a bust. Flat out. You take your quarterback in the top 10, you better be a star. Tannehill's not a star, makes him a bust. Deion Jordan, where's he at now? Seattle. He's hopped around the league a little bit. He was a massive bust, especially since they traded up from 12 to 3 to take him. Juwan James is okay, but he's not special. And he most certainly was a massive reach back in that 2014 draft. Devontae Parker, who I really like coming out of Louisville, I was dead wrong. He had trouble staying healthy. He wasn't utilized well in that system. He's disposable at this point in time. Laramie Tunsil is good, but Charles Harris sucks. I mean, when you really look at that, you're going into a situation where in this 2019 season, the first-round picks you might still have left on your roster from the past 7 to 8 years could be Minka, Charles Harris, because you're just not ready to give up on him, even though he absolutely sucks, and maybe Laramie Tunsil. Maybe you keep Juwan James. But again, in the grand scheme of things, that's not moving the needle for anybody. This team badly, badly needs a difference maker. They need an identity. They need stars. You could say perhaps one of their best draft picks of the best 5 or 6 years was Xavier Howard, the corner from Baylor. Didn't he make the Pro Bowl this year? Oh, fuck that. What does that matter? Everybody makes the Pro Bowl nowadays. But yeah, this team screams out, bottom out, rebuild, as they should. Because they are the perfect epitomization of it does you no good to be mediocre because you'll be just good enough to cost yourself marquee draft position and just bad enough where you have no real shot at the playoffs. But at some point in time in the season, you might believe that you do. So heading into this offseason, what do they need to do? Go all the way. Go the distance. All those cap casualties that I mentioned, cut every damn single fucking one of them. You don't need them. All they could do is help you win a meaningless game or two that could cost you valuable draft position. And it is about that from a big picture, long-term standpoint. Number one team need, obviously, is a quarterback. Because Tannehill's not the dude. The dude is not on your roster. You look at this 2019 quarterback class, good luck heavily investing in some of those guys. Ugh. Miami could get one at pick 13. Do you want to take one at pick 13? I guess I asked Dolphins fans that question. But outside of that, they could definitely use a wide receiver. You know, Devontae Parker hasn't worked out. You traded away Jarvis Landry. What do you got there? Kenny Stills, he might be a cap casualty. You need help there either way. You could probably use some help on the interior of that offensive line. It feels like most certainly you could use a marquee running back, some type of three-down guy. No more of the Kenyon Drakes, and then maybe you're hoping Kalen Ballage gives you more, granted, but if you can get a better back, then you need to go get a better back. Defensively, they need help on that defensive line. Interior on the edge doesn't matter. Their D-line stinks. And that's where the problems begin, in my opinion, for this Dolphins defense. It could use help, frankly, at all three levels, especially when you finish 29th in the league in total yards allowed a game. But 31st against the run indicates that you're really soft in the trenches, you're really soft up the middle, and this team most certainly was. Look, let's not overthink it. The Dolphins are mediocre to bad. Adam Gase needed to be fired. They're idiots for going up the Bill Belichick coaching tree with very little reason of a history of success to do so. This is a team that should totally be in a tank mode. Absolutely. It'll just be curious to see if they go in on a quarterback in 2019 or they have the patience to wait until 2020.